समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
We are living in the Trumpian era. What that means is it's at the same time very worrying, very damaging, can cause a humongous amount of damage to your portfolio, for example. It's also irrational because you don't know what will happen tomorrow. At the same time, this is incredibly entertaining and fun. These are also moments in history where I really love my job as a journalist, because if I wasn't a journalist, maybe even if I was just a markets analyst, I'd be worrying about this a lot more and not having fun with this part of this juncture of history, because this is really a T20 match on the global stage being played out, with one batter hitting it all over the place, sometimes hitting it, sometimes not quite connecting. All this tamasha is going on. So as we know, on Wednesday morning American time, Wednesday morning at 9:37 a.m., Donald Trump indicated that he was sticking with the strategy of destabilizing the markets with his tariffs across the world. And he said at 9:37 a.m., he said it's a great time to buy. But at 1:18 p.m. the same day, that is in less than 4 hours, he had reversed his decision, reversed at least to the extent of saying that I am putting a hiatus, a delay on my tariffs on all of the world for 90 days except China, for which he upped it to 125% from 104%. Now, whether it is for real or whether it was to cover for the embarrassment of his retreat on tariffs on all of the world, we don't know. You will never know with Trump. Now, his people are spinning it by saying, Stephen Miller, who's Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, he said, for example, you've been watching the greatest economic master strategy from an American president in history. Caroline Leavitt, who we all know so well because she speaks at the White House every day as the spokesperson, she said, all you guys in the media, you haven't learned the art of the deal. This is the art of the deal, and everybody thought that with these actions, Trump will drive other countries towards China. What's happened now is that all countries want to negotiate with us, while Trump has isolated China. So this is being spun that way. However, the key to what has happened is in this headline of the Financial Times newsletter. This is the Financial Times newsletter called Unhedged. That's Unhedged is the name of the newsletter by Robert Armstrong. And the headline is Markets 1, Trump 0. So what happened? Markets had been falling every day since Trump started this tamasha of tariffs. In fact, he has by now issued 17 executive orders on tariffs and trade. What's been happening with tariffs? If I start telling you, isne lagaya, isne hataya, isne lagaya, isne hataya, then I will sound like these two characters you're going to see right now. I picked this post from Ian Bremmer, and I thought this explains very well what's been happening with tariffs. So this is Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, characters you might know, or at least your children might know. So watch this, right? This is a good explanation of what's been happening with tariffs. So let me not go into 25% इसको, 34% इसको, 80% इसको, 100% इसको, वगैरह वगैरह, then withdrawn, then negotiations will start. Now, what happened in the markets by Wednesday is what broke the camel's back in a way. I know it's a bit of a mixed up metaphor in this case, or what broke Trump's will or Trump's obstinacy, because he thought that he will carry on with this, and his people had started to spin it. Many people on the American right or on the MAGA right. Now we have to make that distinction. The Republican Party is the conventional American right. The MAGA right is a kind of Republican left. They are American nationalists, hard American nationalists who want to make America great again by using many of the Pakka socialist methods. In fact, there was a very interesting column in the Washington Post. Please see it on your screens and I will share a link with you that calls them mega Maoists. Why mega Maoists? Because just like Mao, they think that white collar people who make their living now from keyboards, right, or play the markets or write software, they are living a decadent lifestyle. This is decadence, and they've become so rich by taking away the jobs of blue collar people. So everybody, as Mao would have thought, everybody should go back to the factories. Factories should open. Everybody should line up in front of the factories for their shift in blue collar uniform. So this is a return from the new economy to the old economy. That's why they are called mega Maoists. Now, many of these mega Maoists, you may or may not like that expression. I'm just using it from a column. I think it's a very interesting usage. Many of them were spinning this as an act of genius, as a stroke of genius. And look at America. America has so much debt. All of the world is holding America's treasury bills. Most of all, China, right? All of these treasury bills carry an interest rate, right? If the interest rate comes down, then America's debt repayment burden will become less. So first of all, Elon Musk, by cutting costs, by firing all these hundreds of thousands of people, he will cut the costs of government, so our budget will be balanced. And second, as the markets crash, stock markets crash, as the stock markets crash every day, with trillions of dollars worth of value wiped out, where will people go? Where do people go when they are under a bombing? You go into the bomb shelter, you go into a bunker. Where do you go when there's an earthquake, right? You go on the street, or if you have some place to hide in an earthquake prone area or shelter, you go to the shelter, or you just go to the street. Similarly, when you are hit in stock markets by something that looks like a disaster, that markets are falling every day, where do I go? You will go to one of two places. Either you will move to gold, and gold now is problematic because gold has run up over the past year quite a bit. So people are worried that gold has become too expensive already. Or you will go to government bonds. So what happens when you go to government bonds? When you go to government bonds are more in demand. And that is something which we will explore for a couple of minutes as we go ahead, because it's a little bit of a complexity. If you are a person in banking or the markets, what I explained might sound like bachon ki baat to you. What kind of childlike talk is it? But for most people, this is still quite a mystery. So I will try and explain this to you. But what happened was, as people would have started rushing for bonds, Donald Trump's supporters would have thought that the interest rates on bonds will come down, right? Interest rates on bonds comes down because the demand for bonds has gone up. So interest rates will come down. On the other hand, people got more panicky. Not enough of them were going towards bond also because nobody knew what will happen now. Everybody now thought that these tariffs will actually increase massively inflation in America's economy. What happens when inflation goes up? Then interest rates don't go down, interest rates go up. And if inflation goes up, already US Fed had said, despite pressure from Donald Trump, his repeated messages on Truth Social, the Fed chairman said he's not cutting the interest rates now because there is uncertainty, there is fear, there are apprehensions of inflation rising. So that is how bond interest rates, instead of falling, started to rise. And then rumors spread, and it looks like there was something to it that China spent a large bunch of American treasuries overnight American time, say $50 billion a night. And what that led to was increasing the yields once again. So instead of yields going down, so once again, what was the idea, or what was plugged as the idea as Trump went through this? I'm not sure whether this was Trump's idea or not, but this was rationalized, right? It is not very different from how demonetization was rationalized in our country. That look, people are holding all these trillions of rupees in cash, right? All of this they cannot bring back to the banks. So in the process, maybe 5 to 7 trillion will not come back, and Government of India or the Exchequer or Reserve Bank of India, by that logic, will be richer by 5 to 7 lakh crore of rupees. No such thing happened. All the money came back. In fact, as things turned out, probably more money came back than was seen to be in circulation because some fake currency also came back. So some some similar logic was being circulated now also, that markets will crash, people will panic from the markets, take their money to bonds. In the process, bond yields will come down, and America will then be able to raise more bonds at lower prices, lower coupon rates, and repay its old debt, because after all, by next year, another $9 trillion of US bonds are coming to be repaid. They are maturing, either to be repaid or to be rolled over. So even if you roll them over, you can roll them over at a lower interest rate because the rates would have gone down. The exact opposite happens because the market has a mind of its own. You know what they say in judiciary, may you ever be high, the law is above you. In the marketplace, there is something else. At least I like to say this: may you ever be so high, the market is above you. Or however mighty a monarch you might be, and Trump and his people now think that he's a very mighty monarch, but the market is a bigger monarch than him. It may be wavered, however wavered the market might be, it is still the fairest monarch you can find. And that's what the American markets did to Trump. His stock markets fell, and his bond yields started to rise. As his bond yields started to rise, एक दिन हो गया, 2 दिन हो गया, 2.5 दिन हो गया, and then everybody figured that the Chinese are holding so many bonds that they can just carry on like this, right? Over after over. They can, every night, American time, daytime Chinese time, they can just sell a bunch of American treasuries. And the word then spreads that the Chinese are dumping American treasuries. At that point, the crisis could spiral out of control. And that's when Trump's people got around him and got him to get off this tiger and to say that, look, I'm giving a 90-day pause, and then tried to spin it like some kind of a great, seriously thought out strategic move, as if the whole thing was set up like that. But see what was happening before that. Just 2 days before that Trump was speaking in Washington at the Republican Party fundraiser, where he said his famous line that leaders from 75 countries are calling me. They want a deal. Sir, give us a deal. Sir, give us a deal. I'm quoting Trump. Sir, give us a deal. And we'll try and use that clip also for you on the side. Sir, give us a deal. And then he said, they want to kiss my ass, right? I'm sorry I'm using that expression, but the President of the United States of America used that expression in a public speech.
Any deal, you guys, some of you work for companies, your companies are peanuts. I don't care how big they are. Compared, this is the largest transaction in the history of our country. And don't let some of these politicians go around saying, because I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal.
I don't feel so squeamish about this. He said, they all want to kiss, they're kissing my ass, right? He said that he was really riding high with this. And 2.5 days later, he gets off that horse. That's what happened. The other drama that played out was in the US Congress. And that's where Jamieson Greer, the US trade representative and the main negotiator now with the rest of the world on trade issues, he was being questioned by the Congress. And this was Congressman Stephen Hursford, Democrat from Nevada. And he said, first of all, that you are here, but see, none of the Republicans is sitting here because they can't defend your moves, right? And he attacks him and he questions him that, look, you're taxing everybody, but why have you put tariffs on Australia? We have a zero tariff system with Australia, and we have a trade surplus from Australia with Australia. So why are you taxing Australia? So Greer was sort of going in and out, saying there's a strategy, there's a method to this, etc. And then the Congressman Hursford got more agitated, and he says WTF. Now, I don't have to spell it out because the congressman did not spell it out. So he said WTF. You know what WTF means? I don't think I have heard that expression used in a US congressional hearing. If an equivalent of that was used in one of our houses, definitely by an opposition member, the speaker would immediately expunge it, right? So he says, WTF, who's in charge? And Greer then says, sir, the President of the United States of America is in charge. As he's speaking, around that time, Trump has announced this 90-day hiatus. So Congressman Hursford says, your boss just pulled the rug from under your feet. So that's the tamasha that's been going on over these 48 hours. Now, much else has gone on behind this. First of all the aides kept on saying there will be no negotiations. Then Trump was asked that all your aides have been saying no negotiations. Now you're saying 90 days I'm putting a break. There will be negotiations. So Trump. Now the thing about Donald Trump is, and I know all the great American journalists who've been dealing with the US government system and US politics for these decades, they are struggling to deal with him now because Mao Zedong, old days you used to say, you have to interpret Mao's looks, Mao's smiles, what does he mean, what message is he trying to convey. So his team, everybody, there was not such a media issue in China those days because there wasn't particularly any Chinese media barring People's Daily. And there were hardly any foreign journalists those days. So that wasn't the issue. But even for those making policy in China or those taking actions in China, the story was that you had to interpret Mao's looks or Mao's smiles, right? And in fact, there was also a joke about that. Mao Zedong once smiled at the Indian Sharjah affairs. And that was seen as the first sign that China was thawing towards India. This was early 70s, that China was willing to talk more than 10 years after the war, or about 10 years after the war, that Indian Sharjah affairs, because India and China did not have full ambassadorial relations then. Those had been suspended since the war in 1962. So that Sharjah affairs are number 2 in the Indian embassy. There was a story that Mao smiled at him, and that was described as Mao's Mona Lisa smile. And that was interpreted to mean that he wanted a thaw. That Sharjah affairs, by the way, was Brijesh Mishra. It's a good story to tell at this moment, because just as you looked for Mao's smiles and interpreted them, now you have to read between the lines or hear between the lines of what Trump is saying. And you know what? If you blindfolded me and you played some of the memes on Trump, and some of the finest memes are coming out of China. In fact, they're very creative at that. They're beating the Americans on that as well. But many others from America and elsewhere, if you blindfold me and play a meme and play a real speech or real lines from Trump, sometimes I will struggle to say what is for real and what is a meme, because he himself sounds so incoherent sometimes. Sample these, for example. The question was asked, your aide said there will be no negotiations. You are saying there will be negotiations. So how do you square the two? So he says, a lot of times it's not a negotiation until it is. Uska matlab aap nikaliye. Don't ask me to translate this for you. A lot of the times it's not a negotiation until it is. It may not be a negotiations. It may not last. Maybe I think they are not fair to us. Everybody wants to make a deal. We want to do what is right for our country. You hear all of this, read all of this, make what sense you want of it. Then he says, we also want to do what's right for the world. The world is important, right? You thought the message all these weeks was the world can go to hell. This is all about making America great again. I have these 2 beautiful oceans. I can stay away from the world. Europeans can fend for themselves. Africans, is there something called Africa, right? Doesn't even exist, etc., etc. The Gazans can leave. I will build a new township there. Gazans can all go to Jordan, Egypt, etc., etc. Now you are suddenly saying the world is important. So once again, it's incoherent. Again, see, Tuesday morning, he said, talking to the Republicans, I know what the hell I am doing. Be cool. Everything is going to work out well. As I told you, 9:37 a.m., he said this is a great time to buy, and this was on Truth Social. 1:18 p.m. on the same day, he announced this delay. So this is a very inconsistent person. For anybody to say that this is all part of a well thought out strategy, you either have to be really gullible, right? Or very loyal, genuinely loyal to Donald Trump, or be thinking that you're living in 1984 in an Orwellian universe, or maybe you're living in Putin's Moscow or Xi Jinping's China, because that's where everything the leader says or does is not only right, it has to be rationalized and explained as a stroke of genius. And let me be done with Trump speak, right? After saying everything will be fine, you buy, etc., etc., He again had a justification when he changed his mind. And he said to justify his about turn or U-turn or whatever you call it, may be a great strategic move, right? Tactical move, strategic move. And I quote from him, well, I thought people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy. They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid. And that's when he made these changes. So that is also the New York Times headline, that from saying be cool to saying yippee, people are getting yippee, so I'm calling a halt to all this. It just took a few hours. That's the kind of uncertain world where we live. Now, I take you back to why I thought that Financial Times newsletter headline, Markets 1, Trump 0. And why did I give you that fake poetry, which I made up right now, in praise of the markets as a monarch? That lies in the fact that it is when the bond yields started to rise that Trump and his people panicked. And they said, don't do it like this. Even if you want to do it in installments. This is too destabilizing. We may not be able to contain it or control it right now because things will get out of control. And once things are out of control, you might have a crisis like 2008, that is the global financial crisis, the Lehman Brothers meltdown, or 2020, which came up after COVID. However, when this crisis comes, unlike the last two crises, this will be a crisis blamed on one man, which is you, Donald Trump. And that's where he pulled back. Now, I told you earlier that I will explain to you in a moment what happens when bond interest rates go up. Normally, and any bankers, any fund managers, any of the better informed people on financial markets, I know this sounds like a child's thing to you, right? But most people find it difficult to understand. So the basic thing is that bond prices and yields, they move in opposite direction. When yields go up, bond prices come down. Now you would say, I took a fixed deposit at 10% interest. Interest goes up to 12%. Why should the value of my fixed deposit go down? It does go down because what you've taken in this case is not a fixed deposit. If you took a fixed deposit in a bank, and in the course of time, although banks will say your rate is fixed at that point, in the course of time, it went up to 12%, you will just get that much more interest. But with the bonds, there is a risk. A government or a company issues bonds at a certain coupon. A coupon can be, for example, 10%, which means 1,000 rupee bond, 10% will give you 100 rupees in a year, right? Next year, it goes up to 12%. The rates in the market go up to 12%. So people will say, Arey, I bought that bond last year. It's only giving me 10%. It's a 10-year bond or 30-year bond. Now, RBI is issuing 50-year bonds also, right? So I'm stuck at a low interest. So I'm selling this. I will buy the new bond at a higher rate. So when I go out to sell it, the buyer will say, अरे बाबा ये तो तेरा पिछले साल का बॉन्ड है, इस पे सिर्फ तेरे को 10% मिल रहा है, अभी तो मुझे 12% मिल रहा है, मैं तेरा क्यों लूँ? तो then you will say, ठीक है यार, जितने का प्राइस मिलता है ले ले. So the guy will say, I will take it at today's yield. So I will take this at 12% yield. So a 1,000 rupee bond between 10% to 12% yield or interest rate, the value will come down. The value will come down, and I will explain to you how it works with a little bit of help from, I say this shamelessly to you, from ChatGPT, because it would have involved some calculations. So I just used a notional figure because this month Reserve Bank of India is issuing for Government of India to raise borrowings for Government of India about 80,000 crore rupees worth of bonds, and these range from 10 years to 50 years. If you look at these bonds, now I don't know exactly at what coupon rate these are being issued. I read somewhere it's 7.94%, but if it's not true, it's something else. It doesn't matter. Let me just take 7.94% as a notional rate at which Reserve Bank of India is issuing these long-term bonds, 10, 12, 20, 30 years. And let me not give separate calculations for 10, 20, 30, 50 like that. That will take too long and be too complicated, because the point will be made quite simply. Now, if you see 10-year bonds at 7.94% coupon rate, suppose they are being sold at that coupon rate, and interest rate comes down to 7.5%. That is coming down only 44 basis points. There is 100 basis points in 1 percentage point, right? So 44 basis points it comes down. So a 1,000 rupee bond will then become 1,038.58, because what happens, like, yield is only 7.5%. My coupon was this much, but now in the market rates have come down to this much. So this bond is wonderful, right? This bond, while in the market the rates have come down, this bond continues to pay me 7.94%, while in the market the new bonds get 7.5%, or the market rate is 7.5%. So as yield comes down, bond prices go up. So it just falls from 7.94 to 7.5. It's 1,038.58. That is in addition to the interest. If it falls to 7%, then that bond becomes, the 10-year bond, 1,083.60. It falls to 6.5%. It goes to 1,130 rupees 0.37 paisa. So you can see, as interest rates are falling in the market, that's why everywhere governments are working on getting their interest rates to fall. Because what happens is, when interest rates fall, one, borrowing becomes cheaper for everybody, from industry to individuals, for their housing loans, EMIs for their cars, scooters, whatever. But borrowing also becomes cheaper for the government, because government is the biggest borrower. Governments finance their deficit by borrowing. I think this year government of India might end up borrowing about some 15, 16, 17 lakh crore rupees. So the cheaper the government can buy, the better. So government wants the interest rates to be lower, so their bond prices can be more valuable. It works in another way also. Your banks, for example, and you will see this, when interest rates come down, your bank share prices go up. And you will say, "Arey, interest rates are coming down. My bank should be earning more money," right? Because people who borrow from them, and you might say, "Oh, interest rates are coming down, so my banks should be losing money, because the banks can't charge that much interest on the loans they give out, so banks should be losing." On the other hand, when interest rates come down, when RBI cuts rates, your bank's share prices go up. Why? Because banks, particularly in India, where banks are so tightly regulated and watched by the RBI, they have to put a bunch of their money, say almost about 18-20%, I don't know the precise amount right now, but that's not relevant, a large amount of money into government securities. That is to make sure that banks remain safe. So a large amount is in government securities, a bunch of money the banks have to have their capital, then a bunch of money the RBI holds back on the bank's behalf. So bank can't do business with all 100 rupees it has. That money that the bank has to invest with government mostly goes into government securities, which means government bonds. When interest rates come down in the market, what happens? The value of these bonds go up. So mark to market basis, the bank's own worth goes up, the bank's stability goes up, and that's why as interest rates fall, the bank shares go up. While we might have thought that इंटरेस्ट रेट तो कम हो गया, अभी तो बैंक को घाटा होना चाहिए, लेकिन बैंक को घाटा नहीं होता है. When rates fall, banks benefit, all of us benefit. I will give you some more examples. If this was a 20-year bond, then at 7.5%, the bond price will be 1,057.83. At 7%, it will be 1,116.08. 6.5 will be 1,178.06, and so on. I think the logic is quite clear now. I will give you the other side also. What happens if interest rates go up instead? If interest rates go up, then bond prices come down, which is precisely what happened in America. So see, start again with that notional figure of 7.94, which I read somewhere as the coupon for this month's bonds. If 7.94 for a 1,000 rupee bond goes to 8.25%, then the value of the bond falls, 10-year bond, to 964.91, right? If it goes up to 8.5%, then it falls to 949.20. So as interest rates are going up and I have issued bonds, as in this case means a sovereign, treasury bills, every sovereign issues treasury bills, then I will really worry. I will say, the value of what I've issued, first of all, the interest rates are going up, and the value of what I've issued is going down. This is precisely what happened to Donald Trump in this case. And it is because I thought it's a bit complicated or cluttered for most ordinary folk, including me, to understand that there is an inverse relationship between bond prices and yields, right? Yields go up, bond prices come down. Yields go down, bond prices go up. And that is what ultimately got Donald Trump to change his mind. That's why it's a case of markets 1, Trump 0. Now wait for Trump's next move.